Diana Sterling had spent 27 years learning that extraordinary wealth came with an equally extraordinary lack of privacy.
Mr. Kane.
Drivers knew where she was going before she did. Assistants remembered birthdays she forgot. Security men waited outside restaurants, elevators, boutiques,
He is
even
like a
charity
servant and a
events where
driver
every
in
guest
one.
had already been screened twice.
Doesn't it
She
embarrass
tolerated
you to
most
carry
of it
that?
because she
Do not
understood
say a
what
word,
came with
Luca.
being Richard
Is he
Sterling's
really just a
only
bodyguard?
daughter. But she hated bodyguards. To Diana, an armed man in an expensive suit was never reassuring. He was a reminder. Years earlier, her mother had died
okay?
after violence
I'm
connected to
fine.
organized crime spilled into a supposedly safe part of Chicago. Diana had been young, but old enough to remember sirens reflecting against wet pavement and her father's expression when he returned home without his wife. From that night forward, the word mafia meant only one thing to her: men who destroyed families and called it business. That was why she exploded when Richard announced he was assigning her a permanent personal bodyguard. Then he showed her the photographs. Someone had photographed Diana outside her gym, a cafe, walking into a private club, leaving a friend's apartment. The final picture had been taken through the gates of the Sterling estate. Diana was standing beside her own bedroom window. Beneath the photographs was a typed sentence: "You can't protect her forever." Richard no longer cared whether Diana liked the idea of protection. Across Chicago, another man learned about the threats almost as quickly. Nicholas Kane rarely needed people to explain danger to him. At 34, he controlled an empire that respectable newspapers carefully called private enterprises, while everyone else understood what the Kane name really represented. Nicholas did not look like the old-fashioned crime bosses Diana imagined. He looked far more dangerous. Tall, broad-shouldered and powerfully built, with dark hair, a sharp masculine face, controlled stubble and tattoos extending over his hands and wrists, Nicholas carried himself like a man who had never once needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. And Diana Sterling would have refused to stand in the same room with him if she knew who he was. Nicholas knew that too. He also knew something Diana had forgotten. Nearly 2 decades earlier, before Nicholas inherited violence, territory and responsibility, he had spent one summer around the Sterling family. Diana had been a fearless child with long black hair and too many questions. Nicholas had been the quiet boy other children whispered about because of his family. When several wealthy kids mocked him, Diana had stood beside him without hesitation. Before summer ended, she gave him a small handmade bracelet and made him promise he would not forget her. Diana eventually forgot him. Nicholas never did. When he discovered someone was stalking her, he could have assigned men to watch from a distance. Instead, he made a decision no one in his organization dared question. Nicholas Kane temporarily disappeared. A man named Luca Mercer took his place. Through a legitimate executive security company quietly controlled by Kane interests, Nicholas created an immaculate professional identity. Former executive protection specialist, defensive driving expert, emergency response training, international references, no criminal connections. Richard Sterling interviewed Luca Mercer personally. He hired him before the day ended. Diana disliked Luca before breakfast the next morning. Not because he spoke too much. He barely spoke at all. She disliked him because he remained close enough to remind her that her father had won. During a shopping trip, Diana handed him 3 designer bags without looking back. Nicholas took them. She sent him for coffee. He returned with it. She changed her mind and asked for a different one. He went again. At another boutique, Diana piled boxes into his arms until only his eyes were visible over the top. Nicholas merely adjusted his grip. She expected irritation. Instead, something almost amused flickered in his eyes. That annoyed her more. Later, she dropped her coat across his arm and told him to wait by the car like a driver. Nicholas obeyed. Diana had no idea that men who controlled entire neighborhoods waited hours for appointments with the same man she had just ordered to carry her shopping. She also did not notice the black SUV 2 streets behind them, or the second vehicle that changed positions whenever traffic shifted, or Mason Reed, Nicholas's most trusted lieutenant, watching from behind tinted glass. Diana believed Richard Sterling had hired one bodyguard. In reality, an invisible ring of Kane's security moved around her. That evening, Diana attended an exclusive private club. At the entrance, she turned toward Luca and pointed toward the wall. She told him she wanted space and expected him to stay outside the main room. Nicholas gave a calm nod. Diana disappeared into music and champagne. Minutes later, Mason's voice came through the hidden earpiece beneath Nicholas's collar. 3 unidentified men were sitting in a parked sedan across the street. One had a photograph of Diana on his phone. Nicholas slowly lifted his eyes toward the vehicle. For the first time since becoming Luca Mercer, the expression of patient hired help vanished. And somewhere across the street, 3 men were about to discover that Diana Sterling's new bodyguard was not the man they should have been watching. The men outside the club escaped before Nicholas could learn who had sent them. That bothered him. People rarely slipped through a Kane security net twice. By sunrise, Mason had teams searching camera footage, license plates and financial records. Nicholas gave them one instruction. Diana was not to know. If she discovered Luca Mercer had access to resources no normal bodyguard should possess, the disguise would collapse before he understood who wanted her dead. Diana, meanwhile, believed the previous night had been completely uneventful. Her war against having a bodyguard continued. The more Luca refused to complain, the more creative she became. She made him carry shopping boxes through Chicago's luxury district while she walked several steps ahead. When a cafe prepared her drink incorrectly, she handed it back to him and asked him to replace it. At private lunches, she placed her purse, coat and sunglasses in his hands before directing him toward the wall. At parties, she told him to stay near the entrance. Sometimes she treated him like security, sometimes like a chauffeur, sometimes like a servant she had not technically hired. Nicholas accepted all of it. Men in his organization had seen him negotiate with corrupt officials, rival families and businessmen who controlled hundreds of millions of dollars. None of them would have believed Nicholas Kane had spent Tuesday afternoon carrying 6 pastel shopping bags while a billionaire heiress complained about the wrong shade of shoes. Strangely, Nicholas did not hate it. Diana's arrogance irritated him, but he also saw what lived beneath it. She was not cruel by instinct. She was angry at being watched, angry at her father, angry at the threats, and perhaps angry at a world that had taught her protection always arrived carrying a weapon. Sabrina Cole, Diana's closest friend, found the entire situation entertaining. First, Sabrina had been beside Diana for years. Vacations, fundraisers, birthday parties, breakup, family arguments. From the outside, their friendship looked almost sisterly. But Sabrina had spent those same years quietly comparing their lives. Diana's father had built one of the largest private investment and development firms in the Midwest. Sabrina's father had once run a successful company too, until a financial investigation destroyed it. Richard Sterling had been involved in exposing the fraud. Sabrina grew up hearing a different version. In her home, Richard was the man who had stolen contracts, ruined reputations and destroyed her father's future. Sabrina never forgot that. She simply learned to smile around the daughter of the man she blamed. One afternoon, Diana, Sabrina and several friends met for an upscale brunch. Nicholas stood several feet behind Diana's chair with her coat folded over one arm and shopping bags beside him. One woman glanced at him and laughed. She joked that Diana had somehow hired a bodyguard, driver and personal assistant in one unusually handsome package. Everyone laughed. Diana did too. Then another friend made the joke uglier. She looked Nicholas over and wondered aloud whether men like him ever became embarrassed being paid to carry rich women's belongings. The laughter returned. Nicholas did not react. That was what changed everything. Diana looked toward him. No anger. No humiliation. No attempt to defend himself. He simply stood there holding her coat. And suddenly Diana could see the scene as someone else might. The expensive restaurant. The wealthy women laughing. The quiet employee carrying things because she had decided his dignity mattered less than her convenience. For the first time she saw herself inside the joke. The realization made her uncomfortable. When the woman tried another comment, Diana stopped her. The table went silent. She did not apologize to Luca. Not directly. Diana Sterling had too much pride for an instant transformation. But when they left the restaurant, she picked up 2 of her own shopping bags. Nicholas glanced down, then at her. Diana immediately warned him not to smile. He almost did anyway. That small moment should have meant nothing. Sabrina noticed it. She also noticed how Nicholas watched Diana. His attention was not casual. Whenever someone approached too quickly, his body shifted before anyone else reacted. Whenever Diana stepped toward traffic, Nicholas moved closer without thinking. Whenever another man flirted too aggressively, something cold entered Luca's expression. Sabrina had spent years watching Diana receive things she did not even realize other people wanted. Money, beauty, status, security, attention. Now this mysterious man seemed drawn to her too. Several days later, Richard announced a 3-day retreat at an exclusive South Florida eco-resort. Diana and her friends would stay in private villas, attend evening events and take a yacht excursion to a protected mangrove island. Diana agreed instantly. Then Richard informed her Luca was going. For once, Diana did not argue much. Sabrina noticed that too. That night, as she packed, Sabrina remembered the way Luca had looked at Diana. And for the first time, her resentment developed a new question. Was Luca Mercer really just a bodyguard? By the time their plane left Chicago, Sabrina had decided the Florida trip would give her the perfect opportunity to test him. The Florida resort looked as if someone had built luxury directly into the jungle. Wooden villas stood between palms and dense tropical greenery. Elevated walkways crossed shallow wetlands. Beyond the main lodge, an infinity pool reflected the orange evening sky. And farther away, mangrove forests stretched toward the Gulf. Diana relaxed almost immediately. Nicholas did not. His hidden guards arrived separately. One posed as a wealthy guest. Another blended in with transportation staff. Mason remained mostly invisible, coordinating security from a nearby villa. Diana saw none of it. To her, Luca Mercer was still one irritatingly calm man who happened to follow her everywhere. But something between them had shifted after the brunch. Diana no longer handed him every bag automatically. She occasionally said please. The changes were small enough that she could pretend they meant nothing. Nicholas noticed everyone. The first evening, the group attended a private party beside the resort's infinity pool. Music drifted through warm air. Lanterns glowed between the trees. Diana wore an elegant fitted dress that made several guests turn when she crossed the terrace. Nicholas remained near the edge of the gathering in a dark open-collar shirt, watching everything without appearing to. Diana's friends noticed him almost as much as the other guests noticed her. One woman joked that Diana's father had hired a bodyguard who looked more like the dangerous lead in a romance movie than private security. Another asked whether Diana had checked if Luca was single. Diana rolled her eyes. Embarrassed by the attention, she fell back into an old habit and handed Nicholas her phone. Then her jacket. Then her small evening bag. But she hesitated before releasing the last item. Nicholas caught it. So did Sabrina. Later, Diana stood near the pool with several friends. The mood was playful. Someone splashed water. Another person gave Diana a light shove. Then came a second push. Harder. Diana lost her balance. Her ankle struck the pool edge. She disappeared into the water. For 1 second everyone laughed. Nicholas was already moving. His jacket hit the stone. Then he entered the pool. Diana could swim, but pain shot through her ankle and the soaked fabric of her dress wrapped heavily around her legs. Nicholas reached her before panic could. One arm stabilized her while he guided her toward the edge. He lifted her out with controlled strength. By the time Diana sat wrapped in towels, water was dripping from Nicholas's dark hair. His shirt clung to his broad chest and shoulders, revealing more of the tattoos running across his wrists and forearms. One palm had scraped hard against the stone. Blood mixed with pool water. Diana barely noticed her own embarrassment until one of her friends laughed again. She joked that Luca truly did jump the second Diana needed something. Several others smiled. Diana did not. She looked at Nicholas. He was kneeling in front of her, checking the swelling around her ankle. His own hand was bleeding. He had not even looked at it. Everyone else had laughed first. He had moved first. The difference settled somewhere uncomfortable inside Diana. She told her friends to stop. The mood changed immediately. Sabrina watched Diana's face closely. She had arranged the harder push through one of the women at the party. Not to kill Diana. Not yet. She wanted to see what Luca would do. What happened next interested her more than the rescue itself. Two men across the terrace had moved at exactly the same moment Nicholas entered the pool. One touched an earpiece. Another stepped toward Diana. Then Nicholas raised two fingers almost casually. Both stopped. Sabrina stared. Bodyguards did not normally command other security teams without speaking. Later that night, Nicholas stood outside his villa examining a message from Mason when Diana approached. She placed a cup of coffee beside him. He looked at it, then at her. Diana said nothing about the pool. Instead, she placed a small first aid kit next to the cup and told him his hand looked terrible. It was the closest thing to an apology Nicholas expected from her. He thanked her. Diana started walking away, then paused. For the first time she asked whether he was okay. Nicholas answered that he was. The question affected him more than it should have. Across the courtyard, Sabrina watched from the shadows. Her test had produced two answers. Luca Mercer cared about Diana far more than a normal employee should. And someone powerful enough to command hidden security was pretending to be ordinary. The next morning, the group boarded a small luxury yacht bound for a remote mangrove island. Diana expected sightseeing. Nicholas expected a quiet day. Sabrina expected another opportunity. By sunset, the yacht would return without Diana, and the man pretending to be her bodyguard would finally be forced to show how far he was willing to go for her. From the yacht, the island looked almost unreal. White sand curved around thick green vegetation. Mangrove roots twisted through shallow water, while wooden observation platforms disappeared beneath palms and broad tropical trees. Diana stepped onto the dock believing the most dangerous thing she would face that afternoon was Sabrina insisting on taking too many photographs. Luca followed several steps behind. Since the pool incident, Diana had stopped treating him like furniture. She still teased him. She still complained occasionally about being watched. But when she asked him to hold her water bottle, she actually waited for an answer instead of simply placing it in his hand. For Nicholas, that tiny courtesy meant far more than it should have. The group joined a local guide for a trail through the mangroves. Sabrina and 4 other friends filled the afternoon with photographs, jokes, and complaints about the humidity, while Nicholas remained slightly behind Diana in his quiet bodyguard role. The island seemed peaceful. Birds moved above the canopy. Sunlight filtered through tropical leaves. The only sounds were insects, distant water, and the occasional laughter from Diana's friends. By late afternoon, the guide warned everyone that the tide would begin changing soon and they needed to return to the yacht. The group turned toward the dock. Halfway back, Diana glanced at her wrist. Her bracelet was gone. It was simple and inexpensive compared with nearly everything else she owned, yet she had kept it for years. She could not remember exactly where it had come from, only that losing it created a strange sense of emptiness. Diana stopped. She remembered touching it earlier near one of the observation platforms. She told Sabrina she was going back for it and would catch up in a few minutes. Sabrina heard every word. She watched Diana turn around and disappear alone between the trees. And she said nothing. The others continued toward the dock, unaware Diana was no longer with them. Nicholas had moved ahead to speak with the guide about the changing tide and departure schedule. By the time the group reached the yacht, bags were being loaded. Friends were moving between the upper and lower decks, and everyone seemed to assume someone else knew where Diana was. Meanwhile, Diana retraced the trail alone. Several minutes later, she found the bracelet lying beside a weathered mangrove root. Relief immediately replaced her irritation. She picked it up, slipped it back around her wrist, and hurried toward the dock. Then something moved beside the trail. Diana stopped. A muddy channel ran between thick mangrove roots only a short distance away. The water shifted again. A large crocodile slowly emerged near the bank. For one terrible second, Diana could not move. There was no guide, no group, no Luca standing between her and danger. Just Diana, the narrow trail, and an animal powerful enough to make every instinct in her body scream at once. She forced herself to step backward slowly. The crocodile did not charge, but it moved far enough onto the muddy edge to block the direction Diana needed to take. Her breathing quickened. Running could make things worse. Passing closer to the water felt impossible. She looked around desperately. A sturdy tree stood several feet behind her, its lower branches thick enough to climb. Fear made the decision. Diana scrambled upward. Her expensive island outfit caught briefly against the bark. One sandal slipped from her foot, but she kept climbing until she reached a strong branch several feet above the ground. Only then did she look down. The crocodile remained near the mangroves. Diana gripped the trunk and waited. At the dock, the departure became increasingly rushed. The guide warned that waiting much longer would make the return route difficult. Sabrina boarded with the others. She knew Diana had gone back. She knew Diana had not returned. Still, she remained silent. Nicholas glanced across the busy yacht and saw Sabrina among Diana's friends. With people moving between decks, he assumed Diana had already boarded with them. The yacht pulled away. Diana remained trapped in the tree. Eventually the crocodile disappeared beneath the mangrove water, but Diana had no idea whether it had actually left. Every ripple convinced her it might still be nearby. She was too frightened to climb down. Time passed. Through gaps between the trees, Diana eventually saw open water beyond the island. No yacht. Her stomach dropped. She wanted to reach the shoreline and signal someone, but getting there meant climbing down and passing through the same mangrove area where the crocodile had vanished. So she stayed where she was. Sunlight faded from gold to orange. Orange became blue-gray evening. Diana kept telling herself someone would notice. Luca would notice. The thought surprised her because his was the first name that came to mind. At the resort, however, the mistake remained hidden for hours. Some friends went directly to their villas. Others visited the spa. Sabrina casually told one woman she assumed Diana had gone somewhere with Luca. Nicholas believed Diana was spending time with Sabrina. Only at dinner did something begin to feel wrong. Nicholas entered the private dining room and automatically searched for her. No Diana. He checked her villa. Me. He called her phone. Nothing. Resort staff reviewed the returning group. No one could clearly remember seeing Diana on the yacht. Something inside Nicholas went frighteningly still. When he questioned Sabrina, she acted horrified. She admitted Diana had mentioned going back for something, but claimed she had assumed Diana returned before departure. Nicholas stared at her for one long second. Then he turned toward the dock. Back on the island, Diana had fought exhaustion for hours. Every splash below kept her awake until fear itself became tiring. Eventually, still curled against the branch and unable to reach the shoreline to signal anyone, her eyes closed. By the time the first searchlight swept across the island after midnight, Diana Sterling was asleep in the tree. And Nicholas was heading straight toward the mangroves with no idea how close he was to finding her. Nicholas reached the island after midnight. He had refused to wait for daylight. A larger official search team followed at a distance, while Mason and several Kane guards occupied two separate boats farther offshore. Diana still believed Luca Mercer worked alone. Nicholas wanted to preserve that illusion for as long as possible. But the longer he searched, the less he cared about the lie. He checked the dock. Nothing. The main trail. Nothing. The observation platform. Me. Each minute sharpened the fear he refused to name. Nicholas Kane had built his entire reputation on control. He could negotiate while men threatened him. He could remain calm with guns pointed across a table. He had buried people he loved without allowing enemies to see grief. Diana had always been different. Near the mangrove shoreline, his flashlight caught something pale in the sand. Shoo. Diana's. Nicholas stopped. A few feet away, he found a broken branch. Then another. He slowly raised the flashlight. The beam passed over leaves. A dark trunk. Then black hair. Diana was curled against a thick branch above him, asleep from exhaustion. For several seconds Nicholas simply looked at her. Relief hit so violently that it almost became anger. He called her name. Diana stirred. Her eyes opened. At first she saw only the light. Then Luca. The fear she had been holding back all night collapsed. She began climbing down too quickly. Her foot slipped. Nicholas caught her against his chest. Diana's arms closed around him instinctively. He steadied her. She did not let go immediately. For the first time, Diana was not thinking about her father paying Luca to protect her. She was thinking about the fact that he had crossed dark water in the middle of the night because she was missing. Nicholas walked her back toward the dock. Diana stayed unusually close. He gave her his jacket. She did not argue. The small yacht started toward the resort. For several minutes neither spoke. Then the engine coughed. Once. Again. Died. Nicholas opened the compartment and inspected the system. The failure looked wrong. A fuel line had been damaged in a way that should not have happened accidentally. He did not tell Diana. Not yet. The weather began worsening. Wind pushed across the water while the tide forced the disabled yacht toward a shallow mangrove channel. Nicholas deployed the emergency dinghy. He helped Diana inside first. The water became too shallow and obstructed for the small motor to operate safely. Nicholas attached a heavy emergency rope to the dinghy. Then he entered the water. Diana stared at him. He began pulling. At first the water reached his thighs. Then his waist. Mangrove roots and submerged debris made every step difficult. Rain began falling. The rope grew wet and rough against his palms. Diana told him to stop. He continued. She told him they could wait for rescue. Nicholas knew the tide was pulling them toward a worse section of shoreline. He kept moving. Minutes became painfully long. The muscles across his shoulders tightened with each pull. The rope began cutting his hands. Diana saw blood. That changed something inside her. Until recently, Luca's presence had been an inconvenience. Then he became someone she respected. Now she was afraid for him. Not because losing her bodyguard would leave her unprotected. Because she did not want him hurt. Eventually, an old emergency dock appeared through the rain. Nicholas dragged the dinghy to it and helped Diana onto the platform. Only after she was inside a small ranger shelter did he allow himself to sit. His clothes were soaked. His hands were raw. His entire body shook from cold and exhaustion. Diana found blankets and wrapped one around him. By morning, fever had arrived. The powerful man who seemed incapable of weakness lay pale beneath an old blanket, fighting chills. Diana cleaned his hands herself. She brought him water. When rescue staff radioed that they were approaching, she remained beside Luca instead of rushing outside. At one point, Nicholas drifted half-conscious. He murmured a name Diana had not heard in years. Dee. She froze. Her mother used to call her that. And once long ago someone else had too. Diana stared at Luca's face, searching for a memory that remained just beyond reach. When rescue finally returned them to the resort, Nicholas insisted she be examined first. Sabrina stood near the villa entrance waiting. She saw Diana touch Luca's arm before they separated. Something inside her hardened. The pool had pushed Diana closer to him. The island had done even more. And for Sabrina, jealousy was no longer separate from revenge. It had become part of it. That night, while Diana slept, Sabrina sent a short message to a number saved under no name. The island had failed. The next accident, she decided, would have to look impossible to survive. By the third morning, Diana no longer knew what to call what she felt for Luca. Gratitude was too small. Attraction felt too simple. He had crossed dark water for her, dragged a lifeboat through rain until his hands bled, then awakened with a fever and still asked whether she was okay. Diana had spent years assuming bodyguards protected people because they were paid. Luca was beginning to make that explanation feel inadequate. At breakfast, she brought him coffee. Nicholas looked at the cup and remembered the woman who once sent him back across a city block because the foam on her drink was wrong. He almost smiled. Diana told him not to. This time she smiled first. For Nicholas, the moment hurt. Every step closer to Diana made the lie heavier. He had created Luca Mercer because Nicholas Kane would never have been allowed near her. Now Diana was beginning to care about the disguise. Sabrina watched them from across the terrace. Her resentment toward Diana had existed long before Nicholas entered the story. Sabrina's father had once controlled a successful financial firm. Then Richard Sterling exposed evidence showing he had hidden losses, manipulated accounts and misused investor money. The investigation destroyed the Cole family's status. Sabrina was young when it happened. Her father never admitted responsibility. Instead, he taught his daughter that Richard Sterling had stolen their future. As Sabrina grew older, Diana became a living reminder of everything she believed the Sterlings had taken. Diana had money, famous name, a father capable of protecting her, friends who gathered around her, and now a man who seemed willing to destroy himself keeping her alive. The pool had been a test. Leaving Diana on the island had been deliberate. The damaged yacht had not been an accident. And Sabrina had watched every failure turn Diana and Luca into something closer. That afternoon, the resort arranged a scenic excursion through a private tropical preserve. A suspended pedestrian bridge crossed a deep tidal gorge surrounded by thick forest. It was one of the property's most photographed locations. Perfectly beautiful, perfectly isolated. Diana stepped onto the bridge with several friends. Nicholas remained close behind. Sabrina slowed near the entrance. Earlier that morning, 2 men she had secretly paid had accessed the bridge under the cover of maintenance. They had weakened critical supports. One final cable remained. Diana reached the center. Wind moved through the gorge. She turned briefly toward Luca. Then came the sound. A violent metallic snap. The bridge dropped. People screamed. One side tilted downward as wooden planks twisted beneath Diana's feet. She slipped. Her hands caught the side ropes. Below her, dark water and rock filled the gorge. Nicholas moved before anyone else. Another support cable began tearing apart. He ran onto the collapsing structure. Diana screamed his fake name. For 1 second, Nicholas looked at the failing bridge, the distance to Diana and the men hidden throughout the preserve. Maintaining his identity no longer mattered. He shouted a command. The forest answered. 2 ordinary-looking tourists dropped their bags and sprinted toward the bridge. A man Diana had seen driving a resort vehicle pulled rescue equipment from the back. Mason Reed emerged from the trail with 3 more men. Others appeared from positions Diana had never noticed. Everything happened too fast for her to understand. Luca was not asking them what to do. He was giving orders. Nicholas reached Diana. He anchored himself against the remaining support and secured a rescue strap around her. Diana's hands were slipping. He told her where to grip. She obeyed. He ordered her not to look down. She did anyway. Fear nearly froze her. Nicholas brought her attention back to him. Step by step, with Mason's team stabilizing ropes from the far side. He pulled her toward solid ground. A final support line snapped moments after Diana reached the trail. Nicholas landed beside her as part of the bridge collapsed into the gorge. Diana clung to him, shaking. Then engines approached. Black SUVs stopped along the access road. Armed men emerged. more than Diana could count. She initially thought another attack had begun. Then every man looked toward Luca. Their posture changed. Mason approached first. He lowered his head. The others followed. One after another, men who looked far more dangerous than any private guard Diana had ever seen bowed their heads to the man she had spent weeks ordering around. Diana slowly stepped away from him. Someone behind Mason spoke with unmistakable respect. "Mr. Kane." Diana's face lost all color. Because there was only one Kane in Chicago whom men like these obeyed. And suddenly, the bodyguard she had begun falling for had a name she had spent her entire life learning to hate. Nicholas Kane. The name hit Diana harder than the collapse. She had heard it in boardrooms, news reports, whispered conversations between her father and attorneys. The Kane organization existed in the strange space between legitimate wealth and organized crime, powerful enough that accusations rarely became convictions. Diana had spent years believing men like Nicholas represented everything that had taken her mother from her. Now she looked at Luca Mercer and understood there had never been a Luca Mercer at all. Every strange detail rearranged itself. The hidden cars. The men responding to his hand signals. His impossible calm during danger. The way strangers occasionally recognized him and immediately looked away. His ability to produce help before anyone requested it. Diana felt foolish, then angry, then betrayed. She had allowed him into her home, let him stand outside her bedroom, trusted him on the island, cleaned his injured hands, felt something for him she had not yet admitted even to herself, all while he used a false name. Nicholas did not try to defend the lie with excuses. He told her he learned about the threats before Richard understood how serious they were. He believed whoever targeted Diana had access to information inside her father's world. Nicholas trusted his own people more than outside security. But he also knew Diana would never voluntarily accept protection from Nicholas Kane. So he became someone she would tolerate. Diana asked the question that mattered more. Why her? Nicholas could have assigned anyone. Why personally become her bodyguard? His expression changed. Then he took something from his wallet. Faded handmade bracelet. Diana stared at it. The colors had nearly disappeared with age. For several seconds she did not understand. Then Nicholas reminded her of one summer. A large garden outside Chicago. A group of children from wealthy families. A quiet boy named Nicholas whom other kids mocked because adults whispered about his father. A little girl who became angry and told them to leave him alone. Before leaving at the end of summer, she had made him a bracelet. Diana's memory opened slowly. A boy sitting alone beneath a tree. Dark hair. Serious eyes. Her younger self talking enough for both of them. She remembered forcing him to promise he would keep the bracelet. She had jokingly promised she would remember him forever. Diana closed her eyes. She had forgotten. Nicholas had carried the bracelet for nearly 20 years. The knowledge softened something inside her. But not enough. Childhood affection did not erase adult deception. She told Nicholas exactly that. For once he did not argue. Nicholas Kane was accustomed to controlling outcomes. That day, surrounded by men who would obey almost any command, he gave Diana the only thing she had demanded from him since the beginning. He stepped back. He told his guards Diana would return home under sterling protection if that was what she chose. He would not force his way back into her life. That restraint confused her more than pressure would have. Meanwhile, Mason's team examined the destroyed bridge. The evidence was immediate. The support system had been deliberately weakened. Security footage revealed two men entering a restricted maintenance area hours earlier. Financial records connected them to a shell account. Messages connected that account to someone staying at the resort. Diana expected the name of a business rival. Maybe someone targeting her father. Perhaps a criminal enemy who had discovered Nicholas was protecting her. Mason placed a photograph on the table. Diana stared. It was Sabrina. Further investigation came quickly. Sabrina had known Diana returned to the trail alone on the island. She had deliberately allowed the yacht to leave. A resort worker admitted accepting money to tamper with the small rescue yacht. And the pool incident traced back to the friend Sabrina had quietly encouraged to push Diana harder. Suddenly every accident became part of the same pattern. Diana felt physically sick. The enemy had not been watching from outside her life. She had been sharing hotel rooms with her, laughing with her, calling herself her best friend. Nicholas remained several feet away, saying nothing. For the first time since the bridge, Diana looked at him without seeing the Kane name. Because one man had lied about who he was to stay close enough to protect her. The other person had told the truth about being her best friend while secretly trying to kill her. And before Diana could decide which betrayal hurt more, Sabrina disappeared from the resort. Sabrina did not get far. Mason's men found her before she reached the highway. By the time authorities arrived, the evidence had become impossible to deny. The truth devastated Diana not because Sabrina hated her. It devastated her because Diana had loved her. For years, Sabrina had known every private detail of her life. Her fears. Her grief over her mother. Her arguments with Richard. The people Diana dated. The things that made her insecure. All while resentment grew quietly beneath the friendship. Sabrina's motive was not one simple thing. It began with her father. After Richard Sterling exposed financial misconduct inside the coal company, Sabrina's family lost money, influence and social standing. Her father told her Richard had destroyed them. He never admitted his own fraud had created the disaster. Sabrina grew up believing the Sterling family was living the future that should have belonged to hers. Then jealousy made the resentment personal. Diana was beautiful without appearing to work for attention. Rich without understanding what losing wealth felt like. Protected without appreciating how rare safety could be. Sabrina stood beside her for years while privately measuring everything she lacked. Then Luca Mercer appeared. At first Sabrina simply wanted to understand him. The pool push was a test. She wanted to see whether Luca reacted like an ordinary employee. He did not. Leaving Diana on the island was more deliberate. Sabrina knew Diana had gone back for the bracelet. She allowed the yacht to leave anyway. When Nicholas returned personally and Diana came back emotionally closer to him, something inside Sabrina shifted. The damaged yacht became escalation. The bridge became murder. By then Sabrina no longer wanted Diana frightened. She wanted her gone. Diana listened to the evidence with almost no expression. When Sabrina was finally taken away, there was no satisfaction. Only emptiness. Nicholas did not approach her. That mattered more than he knew. The man who could order dozens of armed men into motion with one gesture did not attempt to control Diana's decision. He returned to Chicago. No fake name. No bodyguard position. No surprise appearances. For several weeks, Diana heard nothing from him. She expected relief. Instead, she found herself remembering. Not Nicholas Kane, the crime boss. Luca. Then she realized the distinction no longer made sense. Luca's patience belonged to Nicholas. The man who carried her bags while wealthy women mocked him was Nicholas. The man who jumped into the pool before everyone stopped laughing was Nicholas. The man who crossed black water in the middle of the night and found her asleep in a tree was Nicholas. The man who dragged a lifeboat until his hands bled was Nicholas. The man who developed a fever and still asked if she was safe was Nicholas. And the man who ran onto a collapsing bridge without knowing whether he would come back was Nicholas. Only the name had been false. That realization did not erase Diana's anger. Changed its shape. Months passed before she agreed to meet him again. Not at a Kane property. Not at a Sterling estate. A quiet lakeside restaurant in Chicago. Nicholas arrived alone. No visible guards. No Luca Mercer clothes. He wore a dark suit and the expression Diana had once found impossible to read. This time he told her the truth about everything she asked. He did not demand forgiveness. Diana did not offer it immediately. Trust rebuilt slowly. Dinner became another meeting. Then another. She met Nicholas as himself instead of the man he had created for her. He learned to allow Diana space without disappearing. She learned that accepting Nicholas did not require pretending his world was harmless. They argued. They disagreed. They also stopped lying. Nearly a year after the bridge, Nicholas asked Diana to meet him in a private garden overlooking Lake Michigan. There were no photographers, no orchestra, no crowd waiting to applaud. Nicholas had spent most of his life surrounded by displays of power. For Diana he chose simplicity. He gave her the faded childhood bracelet first. Then he showed her the ring. He did not tell her she belonged with him. He asked whether she wanted to. Diana looked at the bracelet. Then at Nicholas. Once, she had ordered this man to carry shopping bags because she believed his job placed him beneath her. Later, she discovered men with weapons lowered their heads when he entered a room. Neither version mattered anymore. She loved the man who had been willing to stand beside her without demanding she become smaller. Diana said yes. Months later, they entered a private gathering together. Conversation quieted. Men straightened. Several lowered their heads as Nicholas passed. The gesture no longer shocked Diana. She understood what it meant. Power followed Nicholas everywhere. Fear did too. But Diana did not bow. She never had. She walked at his side, her hand in his, neither behind him nor ahead of him. Nicholas glanced toward her and smiled. The world could lower its head to Nicholas Kane. The woman he had loved since childhood never would. And that was exactly why, out of everyone in his world, Diana Sterling was the only person he had ever wanted beside him rather than beneath him.